So how much do you really need to start a freight broker business? That's one of the most common questions I get from people who are thinking about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent. And one of the biggest reasons people hesitate is because they hear this number, $75,000. They hear you need a $75,000 freight broker bond and they immediately think, I'm out. I don't have 75 grand sitting around in the bank. But here's the good news. You don't need 75,000 cash to become a freight broker. And compared to many traditional businesses, freight brokerage can still be one of the more accessible ways to start a real service-based business in logistics. You don't need to buy trucks. You don't need a warehouse. You don't need inventory. You don't need a fleet of employees on day one. But you do need to understand the real startup cost and choose the right path. So in this video, I'm going to break down how much money you really need to start, whether you should start as a freight broker or freight agent, and what path makes the most sense based upon your current budget. Because the big takeaway is you don't need to be rich to get into freight brokerage. You just need to choose the right entry point. Let's get into it. Before we talk about costs, you need to understand the difference between a freight broker and a freight agent. So very quickly, the good news is you have two legitimate ways to get into the industry. You can start as a freight broker and build your own company, or you can start as an independent freight agent and earn while learning under an established broker. A freight broker owns the brokerage. That means the broker gets the authority, gets the bond, handles compliance, works with shippers and carriers, and is ultimately responsible for the operation. The biggest advantage is control. And as a broker, you have your own authority, your own brand, your own customer relationships, and the ability to build a real business asset over time. That comes with more responsibility, but also more potential upside. As an independent 1099 freight agent, you work under an existing licensed freight brokerage. The agent does not need their own authority, they don't need their own bond, they don't need their own back office. They're focused on finding customers, helping move freight, and earning a percentage of the profit. The advantage of the agent path is speed and simplicity. It's a faster, lower cost way to enter the industry, learn the business, and focus on one of the most valuable skills in freight brokerage, finding customers and moving freight profitably. So don't think of as an agent as a backup plan. For many beginners, it may be the smartest first step. Hey, before I go any further, do me a favor. Comment below with the word broker or agent. I'm curious which path you're leaning towards right now. Okay, so now let's talk about the cost of starting your own freight brokerage. If you want to become a freight broker, you may need to budget for things like an LLC or a corporation, your FMCSA broker authority application, your BOC3 process agent filing, your UCR registration, your freight broker bond, possibly insurance, some load boards, a TMS, which is a transportation management system, carrier vetting tools, business email and website, and maybe even some training. And some type of system to track prospects, customers, and follow-up, typically called the CRM. Now, the cost that gets the most attention is the freight broker bond. The bond requirement is $75,000, but that doesn't mean you have to pay $75,000 in cash. In most cases, you pay an annual premium for the bond. The premium is based heavily on your credit, your financial history, and how the bonding company views your risk. So one person might get a reasonable quote, and another person might get a higher quote. And someone with poor credit may have a harder time getting approved or may have to pay a lot more. That's why your bond quote can change the entire startup budget. But the important thing to understand is this. The $75,000 broker bond requirement should not automatically scare you away. Once you understand how the bond actually works, you may realize this business is more accessible than you originally thought. So no, you don't need $75,000 cash to become a freight broker. But yes, you do need to understand your bond cost before creating your startup budget. Okay, so now let's talk about becoming a freight agent. This is the lower cost path into the industry. As a freight agent, you don't need your own broker authority, you don't need your own broker bond, and you're not building the whole brokerage infrastructure from scratch. Depending on how you set things up, you may be able to start as a freight agent for a few $100s, maybe up to a couple thousand. You may still want to get an LLC and some training and maybe some basic tools. And depending upon the brokerage you join, they may charge you for access to things like a load board or a TMS or other tech. But compared to starting your own brokerage, the upfront cost is much, much lower. The trade-off is you don't get to keep 100% of the profit. Most freight agents earn between 50 and 70% of the profit on the freight they bring in and help move. But if the brokerage is providing the authority and the bond and the back office and the accounting and the carrier setup and the support, that split may be well worth it. A strong freight agent can build a very real income stream without carrying the same startup burden and risk as a broker. Now let's break down the cost based upon your actual startup budget. If you have less than $1,000, the good news is you still have a path into the industry. Starting as an independent freight agent can allow you to begin learning, prospecting, building income producing skills without the full cost of launching your own brokerage. At this budget level, you would focus on learning the business, understanding how freight moves, learning how to talk to shippers, and getting around a reputable brokerage that can provide the authority, systems, and support. You don't need to look like a giant company on day one. You need to learn the business and start building momentum. Now, if you have a $2,000 to $5,000 budget, you have enough to launch a lean brokerage, especially if your bond quote is reasonable and you can keep your startup simple. This budget may allow you to cover some of the basics like your LLC, the authority, BOC3, your UCR, the bond premium, your email and website setup, training, and some essential tools. The key is to stay focused. Do not overspend early. Do not buy every tool. Do not try to look like a huge company before you have customers. Start lean, get the essentials, and focus heavily on sales. Because the real opportunity is not in having the authority. The real opportunity is using that authority to win customers, move freight, and create profit. Now, if you have a $5,000 to $10,000 budget, that's a strong startup range for someone who wants to launch a freight brokerage seriously. This gives you more breathing room. You can cover the startup filings, handle a reasonable bond premium, get the basic tools you need, invest in training, and still have some cushion for unexpected costs. So if your goal is to own your own brokerage, build your brand, and create something that you can grow over time, this range can give you a solid foundation. Now, if you have $10,000 or more, you're in a very strong position to start. You can invest in the right tools, the right training, a professional setup, and a stronger prospecting system. But I would still not recommend wasting money. You don't need a fancy office. You don't need to hire people immediately. You don't need every software tool on the market. Money helps, but skills win. The money gives you breathing room, but your ability to find shippers, solve problems, build relationships, and move freight profitably is what really creates the business. Now let me give you a few big mistakes to avoid. Mistake number one is thinking that the $75,000 bond means you need $75,000 cash. That misunderstanding keeps a lot of good people from even exploring the opportunity. Mistake number two, getting licensed before learning how to get customers. A lot of new brokers spend all their time on their authority, their bond, their website, their logo, the software, but they have no real plan to find shippers. That's backwards. The money is made when you get customers and move freight profitably. Mistake number three is buying too much software too early. You don't need every tool on day one. You need the right tools for the stage that you're in. Mistake number four is treating the agent path like somehow less valuable. This is a huge mistake. A freight agent who knows how to sell, prospect, and build customer relationships can create a real income opportunity. So don't look at agent as less than, look at as a lower starting entry point with a real significant upside. Now, I want to hear from you. Comment below with either broker or agent and let me know which path you're considering. And if you want help figuring out the startup process, check out the free resource link below the video. I've trained over 10,000 students through my Freight Broker Bootcamp, and my goal is to help you understand the business before you spend money in the wrong places. If you found this video helpful, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.